Sir, they're watching me. The words came out in a whisper. Small, dark fingers tugged at the sleeve of his tailored suit. The little girl kept her eyes on the polished marble floor, not on him. They're watching me because I'm black. She said it the way a child says something she has said before. Quiet, certain, like a fact she learned too early. Adaeze Okonkwo's hand stopped mid-air, a platinum watch dangling between his fingers. The glass display case hummed softly beneath the showroom lights. He looked down. A little girl in a worn purple coat stood beside him, her braids neat, her sneakers scuffed against the polished stone. Behind her, two sales associates watched from across the floor, one already reaching for a radio. She was 5, maybe 6 years old, and she had come to him, a stranger, because there was no one else. But let me take you back to the beginning. 2 hours before that whisper, before those small fingers found his sleeve, Adaeze Okonkwo stepped out of a black sedan on East 57th Street in Manhattan. His driver held the door. Adaeze adjusted the cuff of his charcoal suit and glanced up at the building. The sign above the entrance read, Harrington and Cole. Gold letters pressed into black granite. No flashing lights, no window displays screaming for attention. Just a name, a doorman, and the faint scent of cedar drifting through the entrance. Adaeze had been here before. Twice, maybe 3 times. Once for his wife's anniversary. Once after her funeral, when he returned the bracelet she never got to wear. Today, he was here for Amara. His daughter turned 6 on Saturday, and she had asked for one thing: a music box. Not a toy one, Daddy, a real one, the kind that plays when you open it. He had smiled when she said it. She sounded like her mother. The doorman nodded as Adaeze passed. Inside, the showroom opened wide. Cream marble floors, glass display cases lit from below, soft piano playing from speakers hidden in the ceiling. The air smelled like leather and something floral, gardenia maybe, or jasmine. 3 associates stood behind the counters, 2 men in dark suits, 1 woman near the back, tall, blonde, her name tag reading Mrs. Aldrich. She looked up, saw Adaeze, and came forward with the kind of smile reserved for men whose watches cost more than her car. Good afternoon, sir. Welcome back to Harrington and Cole. Adaeze gave a polite nod. He did not like small talk in stores. He moved to the left display case, where a row of platinum watches sat under soft light. His fingers brushed the glass as he passed them. He was not here for a watch, but he looked anyway. Old habit. Farther along the case, past the diamond earrings and the pearl necklaces and the sapphire rings lined up like small blue planets, he found what he came for. A music box, Swiss-made, rosewood with a silver clasp. When the lid opened, a tiny ballerina turned slowly on a mirrored surface while a melody played. Something classical, something gentle. Adaeze leaned closer. He imagined Amara's face, her wide eyes, the way she held things with both hands, carefully, like everything might break. He could almost hear her say, "It's real, Daddy." Lovely choice, sir. That is one of our finest pieces, handcrafted in Geneva. Shall I take it out for you? Not yet. I want to look a little longer. She stepped back, not far, just enough to hover. Adaeze stood alone in the quiet showroom, hands in his pockets, surrounded by beautiful things behind glass. Outside, the October sun hit the tall windows and threw long gold bars across the marble floor. It was a peaceful scene, clean, orderly, controlled. It would not stay that way. Outside on the sidewalk, a little girl pressed her face against the window. Her name was Zuri. She was 5 years old. She stood on her toes to see past her own reflection, one hand flat on the glass, the other holding the zipper of a purple coat that was a size too big. Her sneakers were white once. Now they were soft gray, scrubbed clean but worn at the edges. Her hair was braided in 2 neat rows that ran close to her scalp, tied at the ends with small yellow beads. Someone had taken time with those braids. Someone who cared. Zuri was not lost. She was waiting. Her grandmother, Mama Nena, had gone into the pharmacy next door. 2 prescriptions, a blood pressure pill, and something for her knees. She had looked at Zuri and said, "Stay right here, baby. Do not move. I will be 5 minutes." Zuri had nodded. She was good at waiting. But the window pulled her. Behind the glass, everything glowed. The jewelry, the watches, the velvet trays, the little glass shelves lit up like a dollhouse. And right in the center of the display, behind a brass stand, sat a music box. It was small and dark, with a curved lid and a little silver latch. Even through the glass, Zuri could see the tiny figure inside, a ballerina frozen mid-turn on a round mirror. Zuri stared at it the way children stare at things that remind them of something they cannot name yet. Her lips moved. She whispered something too quiet for anyone on the street to hear. Inside the store, Adaeze noticed movement near the front window. A small shape, a flash of purple, a child's hand flat against the glass. He glanced, then looked away, then looked back again. The girl was staring straight at the music box. For a moment, the two of them were looking at the same thing from opposite sides of the glass. Adaeze inside, surrounded by marble and light. Zuri outside, standing on the sidewalk with her coat hanging past her wrists. Neither of them knew the other existed yet, but in less than 10 minutes, that glass between them would disappear. A customer pushed the front door open and stepped out. The door swung wide. A gust of warm air from inside hit the sidewalk. Zuri did not plan to go in. She was not the kind of child who disobeyed without reason. But the door stayed open just a beat too long, and through that open door, she heard it. A melody, faint, tinkling, high and sweet, like a lullaby played on tiny bells. Someone had opened the music box inside the store. Zuri's breath caught. She knew that song. She did not know how she knew it, but her body did. Her chest tightened. Her eyes went wide. She stepped forward. 1 step. 2. Then the door closed behind her, and she was inside. The marble floor was cold through her sneakers. The air smelled different in here, thick and flowery, like perfume mixed with wood polish. Everything was quiet except the music, which had already stopped. Zuri stood still just inside the entrance. She did not touch anything. She kept her hands at her sides and looked around with the careful eyes of a child who understood she was somewhere she had not been invited. The music box sat on the counter, its lid now closed. Mrs. Aldrich had opened it briefly to demonstrate the mechanism for Adaeze, then snapped it shut. Zuri walked toward it slowly, her sneakers barely making a sound against the stone. She got 3 steps before Mrs. Aldrich looked up. The smile dropped, not all at once. It faded the way a door closes when someone realizes the wrong person has walked through it. Mrs. Aldrich set down the velvet tray she was holding. Her eyes moved from Zuri's face to her coat, to her shoes, then back to her face. "Can I help you, sweetie?" Her voice was high and bright. the way adults speak to children they do not trust. Are you lost? Zuri shook her head. No, ma'am. I just wanted to see the music box. Which one, honey? That one. Zuri pointed at the counter. The one that was playing. Mrs. Aldrich glanced at the music box, then back at Zuri. She placed one hand flat on the glass counter, not a gesture of welcome, a barrier. That piece is very delicate. It is not a toy. Where is your mother? Zuri did not answer right away. She looked down at the floor. I am waiting for my grandma. She is next door. Mrs. Aldrich nodded slowly, the kind of nod that means, I heard you, but I do not believe it changes anything. Well, perhaps you should wait for her outside. This is not really the kind of place where children wait alone. Behind her, a younger associate, a man in a dark vest, picked up a radio from beneath the counter. He pressed a button and spoke into it quietly. Security to the front floor, please. Just to check. Zuri heard the static. She looked at the radio, then at the man, then back at Mrs. Aldrich. She did not cry. She did not argue. She pulled her hand away from the counter and stepped back. One step, then another. Her fingers curled around the zipper of her coat. She held it the way she held her doll at home when the apartment was too quiet and the dark felt too close. She understood what was happening, not in words, not in the way an adult would explain it, but in her body, in the tightness in her chest, in the heat behind her eyes, in the way the room suddenly felt smaller, even though it was the biggest store she had ever been in. She had felt this before. At the department store on Fulton Street, where a guard followed her and her grandmother through 3 aisles. At the bookshop near school, where the cashier watched her hands every time she touched a cover. She was 5 years old, and she already knew what it meant when someone smiled at you, but their eyes said, leave. She took another step back. The music box sat on the counter behind Mrs. Aldrich, its lid shut, its melody locked inside. Adaeze had not moved from his spot near the watch display, but he had seen everything. He saw Mrs. Aldrich's hand go flat on the glass. He saw the associate reach for the radio. He heard the static. He watched Zuri step back, one foot behind the other, her fingers pulling at her zipper, her eyes dropping to the floor. He did not react right away. Adaeze Okonkwo was not a man who moved on impulse. He built his career reading rooms, reading people, reading the distance between what someone said and what they meant. He had closed deals across 3 continents by sitting still and watching. So he watched. He watched Mrs. Aldrich's posture shift from hospitality to patrol. He saw the way her body angled toward Zuri, not to help, but to herd. He noticed that no other customer in the store, not the older couple near the bracelet case, not the man in the gray coat trying on cufflinks, had received a single glance from security. Just the girl. Just Zuri. He set down the watch he had been holding. His jaw tightened, not from anger, not yet, but from recognition. The slow, ugly recognition that he was watching something unfold that had nothing to do with shoplifting, nothing to do with store policy, and everything to do with a child's skin. He had a daughter. She was 6. Amada had warm brown skin like his own, thick, curly hair her mother used to twist into puffs every Sunday night. Last month, he brought her to a jewelry store on Madison Avenue to pick out a charm for her bracelet. The associate had offered her a glass of sparkling water on a silver tray. She had sat on a velvet stool and tried on rings for 20 minutes while 2 employees smiled at her as though she were royalty, because her father wore a $5,000 suit. No one called security. No one asked if she was lost. Adaeze looked at Zuri again. She was standing near the door now, small and still, her arms at her sides, waiting for someone to tell her what to do next. He folded his hands. He did not speak, but something behind his eyes had changed. The calm was still there, but now it had edges. Zuri did not leave. She stood near the entrance with her back almost touching the glass door. Her fingers still gripped her zipper. Her eyes were on the floor, but her feet did not move toward the exit. She looked up once, quickly, the way a child checks a room before making a decision. Her gaze passed over Mrs. Aldrich, passed over the associate with the radio, passed over the couple near the bracelet case who had not noticed her at all. Then it landed on Adaeze. He was the only person in the store who had not looked at her like a problem. He had not smiled at her either. He had not done anything. But that was the point. He had simply looked at her the way you look at a person. Zuri let go of her zipper. She walked toward him, not fast, not slow. The careful walk of a child crossing a room she knows she is not supposed to be in. She stopped beside him. Her head barely reached his elbow. She lifted one hand and tugged the edge of his jacket sleeve. Gently, the way you tap someone in church when you need to tell them something important. Adaeze looked down. "Sir, they are watching me because I am black." She did not cry. She did not shake. She said it the way she might say the sky is blue or the store closes at 6. A fact, simple and heavy and old beyond her years. Adeze's hand stopped. The watch he had been examining hung between his thumb and forefinger, forgotten. His jaw shifted. His chest rose once, held, then released. He did not speak. Not right away. He looked at Mrs. Aldrich across the showroom, then at the associate near the radio, then back at Zuri. The girl waited. She had said what she came to say. Now she stood there, small and still, watching his face for whatever came next. Adaeze set the watch down on the glass counter. The sound was barely a click, but something about the way he did it, slow, deliberate, final, made it feel like a door closing. He turned his whole body toward Zuri. Adaeze said, "What is your name?" Zuri said, "Zuri." Adaeze said, "Zuri, show me which music box you came in here to see." Her eyes widened. She blinked twice. Then she pointed across the room, past the diamond rings and the pearl necklaces, past Mrs. Aldrich and the velvet trays, toward the counter where the rosewood music box sat under a warm light. Zuri said, "That one. The one with the ballerina." Adaeze straightened his jacket. He placed one hand lightly on Zuri's shoulder, not heavy, not possessive, just present. The way a father rests his hand on his daughter's back when they cross a street. Then he walked her across the showroom floor. Their footsteps echoed against the marble, his solid and measured, hers soft and quick. The sound of a man and a child walking together through a place that had tried to push one of them out. They stopped in front of the counter. Mrs. Aldrich was already there, her smile reappearing like a light switched back on. Mrs. Aldrich said, "Mr. Okonkwo, were you interested in that piece? I can open the case for you right away." Adaeze did not return the smile. He said, "This young lady would like to see the music box. Can you open the case for her, please?" It was not a question. His voice was calm, even, but the emphasis landed exactly where he placed it. For her. Not for me. For her. Mrs. Aldrich's smile flickered. Her eyes moved to Zuri, then back to Adaeze. She hesitated for just a second, the kind of second that says everything. Mrs. Aldrich said, "Of course." She unlocked the glass case and lifted the music box out with both hands. But she set it on the counter in front of Adaeze. Not in front of Zuri, in front of Adaeze. Adaeze looked at the music box. Then he picked it up carefully and held it out to Zuri. He said, "Go ahead. It is yours to look at." Zuri reached for it with both hands, her fingers small against the dark wood. She held it the way children hold things that feel important, close to her chest, with her thumbs pressed against the edges. She opened the lid. The ballerina rose. The mirror caught the showroom light and the melody began. Soft, high, a few notes that floated up like smoke from a candle. Zuri went still. Her lips parted. Her eyes fixed on the tiny figure turning slowly on its mirror. Something passed through her face, something too large for a child, too quiet for anyone else in the room to understand. Zuri said, "My mama had one like this. It played the same song. She kept it on her dresser. She let me open it before bed sometimes." Adaeze asked, "Where is your mama now?" Zuri did not answer right away. She watched the ballerina turn one full rotation, then another. Zuri said, "She is in heaven." The melody kept playing. The ballerina kept turning. The light from the display case fell across Zuri's hands and made the silver clasp glow. Adaeze's right hand closed slowly at his side. His thumb pressed hard against his index finger. His eyes moved to the window, to the street outside, to somewhere farther than that. He did not say, "I am sorry." He did not say, "I understand." He did not say anything at all for a long moment. But if you had been standing close enough, you would have seen his throat move. A single swallow. The kind a man makes when something hits a wound he thought had healed. Zuri held the music box and listened to the song. She did not know that the man beside her had once stood in a bedroom on the Upper East Side, holding a similar box, listening to the same kind of melody while a hospice nurse packed away his wife's things. She did not know any of that. She only knew that he was still standing next to her, and that was enough. The melody wound down. The last note hung in the air for a second, thin and bright, and then it was gone. Zuri closed the lid gently. She looked up at Adaeze. She said, "Thank you for letting me hear it." Mrs. Aldrich watched from behind the counter. Her expression had not changed. If anything, it had tightened. She glanced toward the back of the store, then at her colleague near the entrance, and gave a small nod. The kind of nod that meant, "Handle it." 2 minutes later, a man in a dark blazer appeared at the edge of the showroom. He was tall, broad across the shoulders, with a name badge clipped to his pocket that read, "Security." He walked in from a side corridor and stopped a few feet from the counter. He did not look at Adaeze. He looked at Zuri. Mrs. Aldrich stepped toward him and lowered her voice, though not low enough. She said, "There is an unaccompanied minor on the floor. She has been here for several minutes without a parent or guardian." The guard nodded. He approached Zuri calmly, the way store security is trained to approach. Hands visible, posture open, voice steady. He said, "Hey there, sweetheart. Where are your parents?" Zuri looked up. Her grip on the music box tightened. She glanced at Adaeze, then back at the guard. She said, "My grandma is next door. She told me to wait outside." Mrs. Aldrich said, "So you are not supposed to be in here." Her voice was soft, almost sympathetic, as if she had just solved a small mystery. "That is what I thought." She turned to the guard. "Can you help her find her grandmother, please? We do not want her to get lost." Zuri's chin dropped. She held the music box closer. She said, "I am not lost." The guard extended his hand. He said, "Come on, sweetheart. Let us go find your grandma." Zuri did not take his hand. She looked at Adaeze again. Her eyes asked the question her mouth could not form. Adaeze stood still. He watched the guard. He watched Mrs. Aldrich. He watched the way the scene was being arranged. Politely, efficiently, and entirely around removing a 5-year-old girl from a room where she had done nothing wrong. The guard reached gently for Zuri's arm. Adaeze said, "She is with me." Adaeze's voice cut the silence cleanly, not loud, not angry. 3 words spoken the way a man speaks when he is accustomed to ending conversations, not starting arguments. The guard froze. His hand hovered near Zuri's elbow. He looked at Adaeze as if hearing him for the first time. Adaeze said, "She is with me. She is not lost. She is not unaccompanied. She is standing here with me looking at a music box. Is there a problem with that?" The guard pulled his hand back slowly. He glanced at Mrs. Aldrich. She opened her mouth, closed it, then pressed her lips together. The guard said, "No problem, sir. Just checking." He stepped back. Then he turned and walked toward the corridor he had come from. Mrs. Aldrich remained behind the counter. Her face had lost its polish. The smile was gone now, not hidden, just absent. She looked at Adaeze the way someone looks at a person who has just changed the rules of a game she thought she was winning. Adaeze did not look at her. He looked at Zuri. The girl's eyes were full. Not crying, not yet, but full the way a glass fills to the very top before the water spills over the edge. She looked up at him with an expression that did not belong on a 5-year-old. It was the look of someone who had waited a long time for a thing she had stopped expecting. Zuri said, "Thank you." Adaeze gave a small nod. That was all. One nod. But his hand stayed on her shoulder, and he did not step away. Across the store, the older couple near the bracelet case exchanged a glance. The man in the gray coat who had been trying on cufflinks looked up and then quickly down again. A younger associate standing near the back wall held a velvet tray against her chest and did not move. The room was the same: the marble, the glass, the gold letters, the soft piano. Nothing had changed. But the air felt different, the way a room feels after someone has said something true in a place built on appearances. The front door opened. A woman stepped inside, breathing hard, one hand gripping a white pharmacy bag, the other reaching for the doorframe to steady herself. She wore a navy blue coat, buttoned to the top despite the warmth inside the store. Her shoes were flat and sensible, the kind made for walking long distances. Her hair, silver at the temples, was wrapped in a rich Ankara headscarf tied with quiet dignity. She was 63 years old, and she looked every year of it. Her eyes swept the showroom, quick and sharp, the way a woman looks when she has spent her whole life being responsible for someone small. She found Zuri immediately. The girl was standing beside a tall man in a charcoal suit, holding a music box against her chest. Mama Nena's body went rigid. She said, "Zuri!" Her voice carried across the marble floor. It was not loud, but it had the weight of a woman who had raised children and buried one. Zuri turned. She said, "Grandma!" Mama Nena said, "Come here, right now." Zuri did not argue. She walked toward her grandmother, still holding the music box. Mama Nena took her gently by the shoulder and pulled her close, wrapping one arm around her. Her other hand still held the pharmacy bag. 2 pill bottles rattled inside. Mama Nena looked at Adaeze. She did not smile. She did not thank him. She studied him the way a woman studies a stranger standing too close to her grandchild in a place that does not feel safe. She said, "Who are you?" It was not rude, it was direct. Adaeze said, "My name is Adaeze Okonkwo. Your granddaughter came into the store while you were next door. Some of the staff gave her a hard time. I stayed with her." Mama Nena's eyes moved from Adaeze to Mrs. Aldrich, who was rearranging trays behind the counter with great concentration. Then to the associate with the radio, who was suddenly very interested in a display of watches near the wall. Mama Nena's jaw tightened. She looked down at Zuri. She said, "Did they follow you?" Zuri nodded. Mama Nena said, "Again." It was not a question. Zuri said, "He helped me, Grandma. They were watching me again, and he told them to stop." The word "again" landed like a stone in water. It rippled outward. Adaeze heard it. He understood what it meant. Not a first time. Not an accident. A pattern. A thing this child had learned to expect, the way other children expected bedtime or breakfast. Mama Nena straightened. She shifted the pharmacy bag to her other hand. Her fingers trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the blood pressure medication she had not yet taken. She said, "Thank you." Her voice was careful, measured. The kind of thank you a proud woman gives when she wants to be grateful but cannot afford to be in anyone's debt. "You did not have to do that," she added. Adaeze looked at the pharmacy bag, at her coat, clean but worn at the cuffs, at her shoes, resoled at least once, at her hand on Zuri's shoulder, steady despite the tremor. He did not ask questions. He did not offer anything. He simply nodded and said, "She is a brave girl." Mama Nena said, "I know she is." For a moment, the 3 of them stood in the middle of the showroom, surrounded by glass cases full of things most people could not afford, and none of them said a word. Zuri looked up at her grandmother, then at Adaeze, then at the music box still in her hands. She held it out to Adaeze. She said, "Here, this is yours." Adaeze looked at the box, then at Zuri. He did not take it. He said, "Hold on to it for a minute. I am not done looking." Mama Nena studied him again. Something in her expression shifted. Not trust, not yet, but the beginning of it. The kind of opening that happens when a stranger does something small that a proud woman cannot explain away. She kept her hand on Zuri's shoulder. She kept her eyes on Adaeze. And she waited. There was a small seating area near the back of the showroom. 2 leather chairs, a glass table, a pitcher of water with sliced cucumber floating inside. It was the kind of space designed for clients who spent enough to deserve comfort while they waited for gift wrapping. Adaeze gestured toward it. He said, "Please, sit for a moment." Mama Nena said, "We should be going." Adaeze said, "You just came from the pharmacy. Your granddaughter is fine. Sit down. Catch your breath." Mama Nena looked at the chairs, then at Zuri, then back at Adaeze. She did not sit, but she moved toward the seating area and stood beside the chair, one hand resting on its arm. It was a compromise. The kind a proud woman makes when her knees hurt, but her dignity will not let her accept a favor from a stranger. Zuri sat on the floor between them, cross-legged, the music box in her lap. She opened the lid again. The melody drifted up, small and clear in the quiet showroom. Adaeze lowered himself into the other chair. He did not rush the conversation. He let the music play. He asked, "How long have you been raising her?" Mama Inenna said, 2 years, since my daughter passed. Adaeze nodded slowly. He did not say, "I am sorry," the way most people do, fast and automatic, like a reflex that means nothing. He said, "What happened?" It was not a question that demanded an answer. It was an opening. Mama Inenna could walk through it or leave it closed. She walked through it. She said, "Lupus. My Adaora had it since she was 24. She fought it for 12 years. Near the end, her kidneys gave out. She was 36. Mama Inenna's voice was even, flat almost. The voice of a woman who had told this story enough times that the words no longer cut the way they used to. They just sat there, heavy and still. Zuri did not look up. She kept her eyes on the ballerina turning in the music box. But her fingers had stopped moving. She was listening. Mama Inenna said, "Adaora asked me to take Zuri before she passed. She said, 'Mama, do not let her end up in the system.' So I did not. I was 59. My husband was already gone. I had a pension and a 2-bedroom apartment in the Bronx. Not much else. But I had arms and I had time. So I took her." Adaeze listened. His hands were folded in his lap. He did not interrupt. Mama Inenna said, "The heart trouble came after." She touched her chest lightly, the way someone touches a bruise to see if it still hurts. "Stress, the doctors say. I do not know about that. I just know some mornings it is hard to get up the stairs." She looked at Adaeze directly. "But we manage. We always manage." It was not a complaint. It was a line drawn in the ground. A declaration. We are not here to be pitied. Adaeze held her gaze. He said, "I lost my wife 3 years ago. My daughter, Amara, is about Zuri's age. She turns 6 on Saturday." Mama Inenna studied him. Her expression shifted. Not sympathy. Recognition. The recognition that passes between two people who have stood in the same dark room, even if they entered through different doors. She said, "I am sorry." And she meant it. Adaeze glanced at Zuri. She had closed the music box and was running her thumb along the silver clasp, tracing the edge the way a child traces something she wants to memorize. Adaeze said, "She reminds me of Amara. The way she holds things. Careful, like everything matters." Mama Inenna said, "Everything does matter. When you do not have much, everything matters." The melody had stopped. The showroom was quiet, except for the soft piano still playing from the ceiling speakers. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. They just sat there. A man in a charcoal suit and a woman in a buttoned navy coat, on opposite sides of a glass table with cucumber water. Neither of them touched, while a little girl in a purple coat held a music box and hummed the melody from memory. It was the quietest moment in the store all day. It did not last. Mrs. Aldrich appeared at the edge of the seating area. She had refreshed her lipstick. Her posture was straighter. Her smile was back, wider this time, aimed entirely at Adaeze. She said, Mr. Okonkwo, I just wanted to check in. Is there anything I can help you with? Her eyes stayed on Adaeze. She did not look at Mama Nena. She did not look at Zuri. They might as well have been furniture. Adaeze said nothing for a moment. He let the silence sit. Then he said, "We are fine." Mrs. Aldrich clasped her hands in front of her. She said, "Wonderful. I also wanted to mention, we have a private viewing room in the back for our preferred clients. If you would like a quieter space, I would be happy to set that up for you." She paused. "Perhaps the little girl and her grandmother would be more comfortable waiting outside while you browse? It can get a little overwhelming in here for young ones." Her voice was silk, every word polished, every word designed to sound helpful while doing the opposite. Mama Nena's jaw tightened. She straightened her back and moved her hand from Zuri's head to her own knee, gripping it. Adaeze did not stand. He looked at Mrs. Aldrich with the same calm expression he had worn all afternoon. But his voice, when it came, was different. Lower. Slower. He said, "Why would they be more comfortable outside?" Mrs. Aldrich blinked. She said, "Excuse me?" Adaeze said, "You said they would be more comfortable outside. Why?" She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. She said, "Well, children can get restless in a showroom, and the merchandise is quite delicate, and I just thought." Adaeze said, "You thought?" He let the word land. He did not raise his voice. He did not lean forward. He just repeated her word back to her and let it sit in the air like a mirror. Mrs. Aldrich's hand went to her collar. She tugged at it lightly, a reflex, the way someone adjusts their clothing when they feel exposed. She said, "I was only trying to be considerate." Adaeze said, "Were you?" Near the back of the showroom, a young woman stood behind a display case of pearl earrings. Her name tag read, Amina. She was 23, with rich brown skin and her hair pulled back in a low bun beneath a small silk scarf. She wore the same dark uniform as the other associates, but she stood differently, stiffer, as though she were trying to make herself smaller. Amina had been watching since Zuri walked in. She had seen Mrs. Aldrich follow the girl. She had heard the radio call to security. She had watched the guard approach a 5-year-old and ask where her parents were. And she had said nothing. Now she stood behind the pearl case with a velvet tray pressed against her stomach, her eyes on the floor, her lips pressed together. She knew what was happening. She had known for months. She had seen Mrs. Aldrich watch every black customer who walked through the door. She had seen the pattern, the casual redirect, the polite suggestion that perhaps they might find what they were looking for elsewhere. The way Mrs. Aldrich's smile changed depending on who she was smiling at. Amina had thought about saying something. Twice she had almost gone to the manager. Both times she stopped herself. She had student loans. She had rent. She had a mother back in Lagos who had sold her market stall so Amina could get a position in a place like this. So she stayed quiet. And the quiet felt like swallowing glass. Adaeze turned his attention back to Mrs. Aldrich. She had not moved. He said, "I would like to speak to the store manager." Mrs. Aldrich's face changed. The smile dissolved. Something beneath it surfaced. Not fear exactly, but the beginning of it. She said, "Mr. Okonkwo, I assure you," Adaeze said, "The manager, please."
His tone was the same as when he placed an order at a restaurant. No heat, no edge, just certainty. Mrs. Aldrich hesitated. Then she turned and walked toward the back corridor. 2 minutes passed.
A man appeared from behind a frosted glass door. He was in his 50s, silver-haired, impeccably dressed. His name was Richard Calloway, and he had managed the Harrington & Cole flagship on East 57th Street for 11 years. He walked toward Adaeze with his hand already extended. "Mr. Okonkwo, what a pleasure. I did not realize you were in the store today." He knew the name. Of course he did. Okonkwo Capital held a significant position in the parent company that owned Harrington & Cole. Not a majority stake, but enough to matter. Enough to make phone calls that got returned the same day. Adaeze did not shake his hand. He looked at Calloway the way he looked at CFOs who brought him numbers that did not add up. "Mr. Calloway, in the last 30 minutes, I watched your staff call security on a 5-year-old girl because she walked into your store. I watched your senior associate follow her across the floor, suggest she did not belong here, and attempt to have her removed. I then watched that same associate suggest that the girl and her grandmother should wait outside, while I, the well-dressed man in the expensive suit, was offered a private viewing room." Calloway's smile faded. Adaeze continued. "Your store is part of a chain in which my firm holds a 12% equity position. I sit on the advisory board for the parent group. I tell you this not as a threat, but so you understand. What I saw today is not a customer complaint. It is a governance concern." He paused. "Is this how your store treats every child who walks in? Or just the black ones?" The question stood alone. It filled the space between them the way a bell fills a church after it rings. Calloway did not answer immediately. His eyes moved to Mrs. Aldrich, who stood near the corridor with her arms crossed tightly over her chest. Then to Mama Inenna and Zuri, still sitting in the lounge area, the music box closed in Zuri's lap. Then back to Adaeze. "Mr. Okonkwo, Adaeze held up one hand. "Not finished." Calloway stopped. "There is a young woman on your floor." Adaeze glanced toward Amina, who stood frozen behind the pearl case. She saw everything today, and I suspect she has seen it before. Every pair of eyes in the showroom turned to Amina. Mrs. Aldrich's mouth opened. Amina's grip on the velvet tray tightened. Adaeze looked at her. He did not command. He did not pressure. He simply said, "If you have something to say, this would be the time." Amina did not move for 3 seconds. Her eyes were on Mrs. Aldrich, then on Calloway, then on the floor, then on Zuri. The little girl in the purple coat was looking at her. Not asking for anything, just looking, the way one person looks at another, when they are hoping someone will tell the truth. Amina set the velvet tray down on the glass counter. Her hands were shaking. It is not the first time. Mrs. Aldrich follows black customers. She has done it since I started here 8 months ago. Women mostly, sometimes children. She watches them. She repositions herself near whatever case they are looking at. She asks if they need help in a way that really means she wants them to leave. Mrs. Aldrich took a step forward. "That is not true. Amina, how dare you?" Amina did not look at her. Last month, a woman came in with her daughter to buy a birthday present. Mrs. Aldrich told the daughter not to touch the display, and then called the back office to report a potential shoplifter. The woman was a surgeon. She had been in the store before. Calloway's face had gone pale. I wanted to say something. I wanted to report it. But I was afraid. I was afraid I would lose my job. and I need this job." She stopped. Her eyes were wet, but she did not cry. She pressed her lips together and stood very still, the way a person stands when they have just done something they cannot take back. Adaeze looked at her for a long moment. It takes courage to say what everyone else pretends not to see. Amina exhaled. It was the kind of breath that comes after holding something for a very long time. Adaeze turned back to Calloway. He did not raise his voice. If anything, he spoke more quietly now. The way a man speaks when the decision has already been made and all that remains is the instruction. "Here is what is going to happen." Calloway straightened. His hands were clasped behind his back. "Your store will implement a mandatory anti-discrimination and bias awareness training program for every member of staff. Not a one-hour webinar. A proper program, conducted by qualified professionals, completed within 60 days, documented, audited." Calloway nodded slowly. "Mrs. Aldrich will be subject to whatever internal disciplinary process your company has in place. I am not asking you to fire her on the spot. That is not my decision. But what happened today will be reported, documented, and reviewed. If there is a pattern, and I believe there is, it will be dealt with accordingly." He paused. "And Amina will not face any form of retaliation for speaking up today. Not a schedule change, not a reassignment, not a quiet conversation in the back office suggesting she made a mistake. If she experiences any of that, I will hear about it. And the next conversation will not be this polite." Calloway swallowed. "Understood, Mr. Okonkwo. I will personally ensure. Do not personally ensure. Put it in writing. Send it to my office. Your legal team has my firm's contact information." He reached into his jacket pocket and produced a business card. He placed it on the glass counter between them. Calloway picked it up with both hands, the way a man picks up something that weighs more than it appears. Across the showroom, Mama Anena sat in the leather chair she had finally allowed herself to use. Zuri was in her lap now, leaning against her grandmother's chest, the music box held loosely in both hands. Mama Anena had heard most of it, not every word, but enough. She watched Adaeze standing at the counter, calm, precise, asking for systems instead of apologies. And something shifted in the back of her eyes. It was not gratitude, not exactly. It was something rarer. The recognition that power, for once, was being used the way it was supposed to be. Zuri opened the music box one more time. The melody rose, thin and sweet, and wound its way through the quiet store. Adaeze walked back to where Zuri and Mama Anena were sitting. He carried a small bag from the store, dark green with gold cord handles. He set it on the glass table in front of Zuri. Zuri looked at the bag, then at her grandmother, then at Adaeze. "This is for you." Zuri did not reach for it. She looked up at Mama Anena. Her grandmother studied the bag, then Adaeze's face, searching for something. Whatever she found, she gave a small nod. Zuri pulled the cord handles apart and reached inside. Her fingers found the rosewood box. She lifted it out slowly, holding it with both hands, the way she always did, thumbs pressed to the edges, careful like it might disappear if she held it wrong. She already knew what it was. She had been holding it for the last hour. But now it was different. Now it was hers. She opened the lid. The ballerina rose. The mirror caught the late afternoon light coming through the front windows. The melody began. thin and high, each note landing like a drop of water in a still room. Zuri did not smile, not right away. She watched the ballerina turn, one rotation, two. Her lips parted, her eyes filled, not with tears exactly, but with something deeper. The look a child gets when something lost comes back in a different form. Mama used to play this song. Her voice was barely there, a breath shaped into words. Mama Anena's hand went to her mouth. She closed her eyes. She knew the melody. She had heard it 1,000 times through the wall of her daughter's bedroom. Adaora would play it at night after Zuri was asleep, sitting on the edge of the bed with the lid open and the tiny dancer spinning in the lamplight. Mama Anena had not heard that song in 2 years. She opened her eyes. They were red but dry. She was not a woman who cried in front of strangers. But her chest rose once, sharp, and she pressed her palm flat against it, as if holding something inside. Adaeze stood with his hands at his sides. He did not explain. He did not say, "I wanted to do something nice," or "I hope this helps." He looked at Zuri and said one thing. Every little girl deserves to feel welcome. Zuri looked up at him. The music played. The ballerina turned. The afternoon light fell through the tall windows and made gold rectangles on the marble floor. Zuri closed the lid gently. She held the box against her chest, and for the first time since she walked into the store, she smiled. It was a small smile, quiet, the kind that starts in the eyes and takes its time reaching the mouth. But it was real, and it changed the shape of the room. Mama Anena stood up. She smoothed the front of her coat. She picked up the pharmacy bag from the table and tucked it under her arm. "We should go." Adaeze nodded. He walked with them toward the front door. The doorman opened it. The October air came in, cool and sharp, carrying the sound of traffic and distant conversation. Zuri stepped onto the sidewalk. She turned back and looked at Adaeze. She lifted one hand and waved, not a big wave, a small one, close to her body, fingers opening and closing. The wave of a child who has not yet learned to say goodbye to someone who matters. Adaeze raised his hand. He did not wave back the same way. He held his palm open, steady, the way you hold a door for someone. Mama Anena stopped on the sidewalk. She turned. She did not smile, but she extended her hand. Adaeze took it. Her grip was firm. Her skin was rough. The hands of a woman who had spent her life working. She held his hand for 3 seconds, maybe 4. "Thank you for seeing her. Not for the gift, not for the music box, not for standing up to the staff or calling the manager or demanding change. For seeing her." Adaeze held her gaze. He nodded once. That was all. Mama Anena released his hand. She placed it on Zuri's shoulder, and the two of them turned and walked up East 57th Street toward Lexington Avenue. Adaeze stood in the doorway. He watched them go. Zuri's purple coat grew smaller between the gray coats and black coats moving in both directions. Mama Anena walked slowly, one hand on Zuri's shoulder, the other gripping the pharmacy bag. They did not look back. They reached the corner. The light changed. They crossed. Then they were gone. Adaeze took out his phone. He called his driver. The sedan pulled up 30 seconds later, smooth and black against the curb. But Adaeze did not get in. He stood on the sidewalk, one hand on the open car door, and looked down the street in the direction they had gone. The gold letters of Harrington and Cole reflected in the window behind him. The doorman waited. Adaeze stared at the corner where Zuri and Mama Nena had disappeared. Then he closed the car door. He took out his phone again and dialed a different number. "Get me a meeting with the board, Monday morning, before anything else." He hung up. He looked at the store one more time. Then he got in the car. 3 weeks later, a memo went out from the offices of Okonkwo Capital to every retail partner in the firm's portfolio. The subject line read, "Open Door Initiative, Mandatory Compliance, Effective Immediately." The memo was 4 pages long. It was written in the language of corporate governance, precise, measured, without emotion. But its origin was not corporate. Its origin was a 5-year-old girl in a purple coat who had walked into a jewelry store to look at a music box and been treated like a threat. The initiative required 3 things. First, every retail location affiliated with Okonkwo Capital's investment portfolio would implement a mandatory anti-discrimination and bias awareness training program within 60 days. Not a webinar, not a 30-minute module with a quiz at the end. A proper program developed by qualified professionals, conducted in person, documented, and audited quarterly. Second, every location would install a customer feedback system that allowed shoppers to report discriminatory behavior anonymously. Reports would be reviewed by an independent compliance team, not by store management. The goal was simple. If a customer was followed, profiled, or made to feel unwelcome because of their race, there would be a record, and there would be consequences. Third, every location would establish a whistleblower protection protocol for employees who reported discriminatory behavior by colleagues or supervisors. No schedule changes, no quiet reassignments, no retaliatory performance reviews. Any employee who spoke up would be protected by policy and monitored by compliance for 12 months after their report. Adaeze named it the Open Door Initiative because that was what it was. A door open to everyone. At the Harrington and Cole flagship on East 57th Street, the changes came fast. Amina was promoted. Not because Adaeze demanded it, but because the new district manager brought in after Calloway was reassigned recognized what she had done. She became the store's first inclusion and training coordinator. She stood in front of her colleagues twice a month and led sessions on bias awareness, customer respect, and what it meant to make a space feel safe for everyone who walked through the door. She was 23 years old. She was terrified every time she stood up to speak. But she spoke anyway. Mrs. Aldrich was not fired. She was placed on administrative leave for 2 weeks, then returned to a different position, away from the sales floor, in the inventory department. She was required to complete the full training program. Whether she changed was something only she would know. But the system around her had changed, and that mattered more. Adaeze also made a phone call to Mama Nena. It took him a week to find her number. He called on a Tuesday evening. "Mrs. Nwosu, this is Adaeze Okonkwo. I hope I am not bothering you." Mama Nena was quiet for a moment. "You are not bothering me, Mr. Okonkwo." He told her about the initiative. He told her what was being done. Then he asked her one question. "What was your daughter's name?" Mama Nena paused. "Adaora. Adaora Chidinma Nwosu." Adaeze was quiet for a moment. "I would like to name the scholarship fund after her, if that is all right with you." Mama Nena did not answer right away. When she did, Her voice was different, lower, softer. The voice of a woman hearing her dead daughter's name spoken with respect by a man who had no reason to know it. Yes, that would be all right. The Adaora Chidinma Nwosu Scholarship Fund launched 2 months later. It provided educational support for children in underserved communities across New York City. The first 5 recipients were announced at a small ceremony in the Bronx, 3 blocks from Mama Enena's apartment. Adaeze attended. He did not make a speech. He sat in the second row and clapped when the children's names were read. In Mama Enena's apartment, on the dresser in Zuri's bedroom, the music box sat beside a framed photograph of Adaora. Every night before bed, Zuri opened the lid and listened to the melody. She would close her eyes and hum along, her small voice following the notes the way a bird follows a current, natural and unforced. Mama Enena would stand in the doorway and listen. She never interrupted. She let the music play until the spring wound down and the last note faded into silence. Then she would cross the room, kiss Zuri's forehead, and whisper, "Your mama hears you, baby." And in the dark, with the music box closed and the city humming outside the window, Zuri would fall asleep with her hand resting on the rosewood lid. 5 months after the afternoon in the store, Adaeze brought Amara to the Bronx. It was a Saturday in March. The air was cold, but the sun was out, bright and sharp against the brownstones. They drove across the bridge in the black sedan, Amara in the back seat with her legs swinging, too short to reach the floor. "Where are we going, Daddy?" "To meet someone." The car stopped in front of a narrow building on a tree-lined block. A banner hung above the entrance. It read in bold blue letters, "The Adaora Chidinma Nwosu Community Library." Below that, in smaller type, "A place where every child belongs." The library was small, one room on the ground floor with tall windows that let the light pour in. Bookshelves lined the walls, low enough for children to reach the top row. There were beanbag chairs in the corners, a reading rug with a map of the world printed on it, and a small wooden table near the window where someone had placed a vase of yellow flowers. Mama Enena was there. She stood near the door in a gray dress with a silver pin on her collar. She looked different from the woman in the navy coat, straighter, steadier. The blood pressure medication was working. The worry lines had not disappeared, but they had softened. Zuri was beside her. She wore a yellow dress and new sneakers, white, clean, tied in double knots. Her braids were fresh, with small white beads at the ends. She held the music box in both hands. Adaeze walked in with Amara. The 2 grandmothers and the 2 men nodded at each other in that way adults do when words are not necessary. Mama Enena gave a small smile, the first one Adaeze had ever seen from her. But neither of them mattered in the next moment, because Amara saw Zuri, and Zuri saw Amara. They looked at each other across the reading rug, 2 girls almost the same height, both with warm brown skin, one in a soft blue coat with 2 thick puffs on her head, one with dark braids and a yellow dress. They stood still for a second, the way children do when they are deciding whether someone is safe. Zuri held up the music box. "Want to hear it?" Amara walked over. Zuri opened the lid. The melody filled the little library, bouncing off the bookshelves and the tall windows and the reading rug with the map of the world. Amara listened. Her eyes went wide. "My mama liked music too." Zuri looked at her. She did not ask questions. She simply said, "You can listen whenever you want." Amara sat down on the rug. Zuri sat beside her. The music box played between them, the ballerina turning slowly in the afternoon light. Then Amara laughed, and Zuri laughed, and they stood up and ran together toward the beanbag chairs in the corner, the music box left on the rug, still open, still playing. Adaeze and Mama Nnenna stood near the door. They did not speak. They watched their girls chase each other between the bookshelves, their laughter filling a room named after a woman who had never gotten to see it. Mama Nnenna reached out and touched Adaeze's arm, just for a second. A light touch, barely there. She would have loved this. Adaeze looked at the banner above the door, then at the two girls tumbling over a beanbag, then at the music box still turning, still playing, its melody winding down note by note. Yes, she would have. Outside the window, the March sun moved across the Bronx rooftops. The shadow of the banner stretched along the sidewalk. People walked past without stopping. Cars honked. A dog barked somewhere down the block. The city kept going, the way it always does, loud and fast and full of people who will never know that inside a small library on a quiet street, two little girls were sitting on a reading rug, listening to a music box, and becoming friends. The first time Zuri walked into a store on East 57th Street, she pressed her face against the glass from the outside, a child looking in at a world that was not built for her. Her sneakers were scuffed, her coat was too big, and the woman behind the counter reached for a radio before Zuri could even say a word. The last time we see Zuri, she is running through a library that carries her mother's name. Her sneakers are new. Her laugh fills the room. A girl with matching brown skin and puff buns runs beside her, and neither of them is thinking about glass or marble or who belongs where. Between those two moments, a man stopped what he was doing and looked down. He saw a child, not a problem, not a charity case, not a symbol. A child. And he decided that seeing her was not enough. He had to make sure the world saw her too. Some people walk past the glass. Some people stop. And once in a great while, someone opens the door. The melody played one last time, thin and high and sweet. The ballerina turned. The mirror caught the light. Then the lid closed, and the room was still. If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. This story is a work of fiction. The characters, names, events, and locations are entirely imagined and do not represent real people or real events. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or deceased, or actual events is purely coincidental. This story was created for entertainment and educational purposes, to explore themes of dignity, fairness, and the power of standing up for what is right.